welcome to this webinar jointly organized by UIC, ETCS, HOF Experts Network, and the Human and Organizational Factor Working Group from UIC. I'm really delighted to have you with us today, as we will explore the intersection between ETCS and the human and organizational factor, a topic that is increasingly vital for both safety and system performance. So this webinar follows the workshop held at UIC on June 11 and 12 this year, which brought together ETCS and HOF experts from across Europe. The particularity was that these experts were really experts in both topics, ETCS and HOF. And so those 2 days of workshop on 11 and 12 in Paris were full of insightful discussion and highlighted a shared ambition, which is to create a dedicated space for sharing field experiences, good practices, and the challenges we face in integrating human and organizational factor into ETCS implementation. So that's why we've recently launched this new network of ETCS HOF experts with the aim of continuing this exchange we had in June, building collective knowledge, benchmark on issue and best practices we have, and supporting the integration of HOF into ETCS implementation. So at the time being, several European railway companies have already joined this initiative, this new ETCS HOF network. And I'd like to warmly thank them for their commitment. As an example, Infrabel, SNCF Réseau, ProRail, NS, Irish Rail, Network Rail, Eurostar, SBB, and SNCF Voyageurs have joined this network of ETCS and HOF. We're also grateful to European Railway Agency for their active participation in this workshop in June and in this network of ETCS HOF, and for engaging in this network change request proposal. But at the same time, we know, because we are at the beginning of this network, that we have to work maybe more on the way we write the change request in order to be really considered by ERA. And today's webinar is an opportunity to present the first step of this network and the outcomes from the workshop held at UIC in June. But above all, it's to give the floor to those who have kindly agreed to share their expertise. And before we dive into the content of this webinar, I would like to introduce our speakers and sincerely thank each of them for their time, for their commitment to sharing their experience. Their contribution is really valuable, and I'm confident that, and I hope that their insight will help to have meaningful reflection for all of us. So we are pleased to welcome our 7th speaker. Oui. Alors, sorry. Okay. Sorry for that. Eric Pébré, that is with me in the room, is train driving and safety specialist at SNCF Voyageurs. Jean-Emmanuel Leroy, on my left, He's train driving and safety specialist at SNCF Voyageurs. John Gunnell, who is online, is a principal human factors consultant at Risk Realis. Nora Balfe, the head of human factors and also the chair of HOF working group at UIC. She is from Irish Rail and she is online. And we have also Richard Bay online with us. He is the head of ergonomics and human factors at Network Rail. We have here with me Frédéric Callot, safety culture specialist from Infravel, and Bernard Penners on my right is safety culture specialist at Infravel. So just a quick note on logistics. We will have 2 Q&A sessions in this webinar, one halfway through and another at the end. So feel free to drop your question in the chat at any time. And if possible, don't forget to mention which speaker your question is for. So I would like to thank you all, speaker and participants, for being here today. And I wish you a great webinar. I would like now to give the floor to Nora Balfe, who is online with us.
Thank you, Virginie. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. So I'm going to give a little bit of background to the workshop that we held, where the outputs form the basis of this webinar. So the idea for that webinar came from a discussion at the UIC Human and Organisational Factors Working Group in February 2024. During that discussion, it became clear that many railways were facing the same kinds of issues with ETCS, and we decided later that year to hold a workshop to gather together the common experiences of human factors issues across different railways. The Human Factors Working Group identified a set of experts who have knowledge of both ETCS and human factors, and the invitations were issued for the 2-day workshop at UIC Headquarters in France. The workshop itself was held in June 2025, where participants from more than 10 different railway organisations joined representatives from UIC and the European Railways Agency to discuss and consolidate experiences. The outputs from that workshop form the basis of today's webinar. So we had 5 objectives for the workshop. First was to create a community of practice composed of knowledgeable individuals that could contribute to the effective design and implementation of ETCS. The second was to share knowledge and understanding of HOF issues with ETCS between that group. And the third, to identify where we had common issues across different railway organisations. The fourth was to share any solutions that we had found locally that we might be beneficial to other railways to mitigate those issues with ETCS. And the fifth was to identify any HOF issues that might warrant a change proposal to ERA and to put those together and to escalate them to ERA. Before we start presenting on the specific issues, we wanted to give you a little bit of background and information on human and organisational factors for anyone participating who maybe doesn't have a strong understanding of the discipline. HOF is a systems-focused discipline. We don't only look at the people who work in the railway, but at all the interactions they have within the railway environment. It's also design-focused. We use our knowledge of human capabilities and limitations to design systems that support human performance. The model you can see on this slide is called the shell model, and it illustrates how the human, or in this model it's called the liveware, represented by the L in the centre, so how that human interacts with the hardware environment, other people, or liveware, and software. Software in this model doesn't only refer to computer software, but the processes and procedures that have to be followed. For ETCS, some of the hardware interactions we can look at might be between the people and the interaction with the DMI or the use of touchscreens, and the accessibility of the hardware in the cab and signalling environments. We might examine procedures like ETCS braking curves and fault procedures and forms and how well the people using these can follow them. We might also look at how the systems are integrated within the wider cab and signalling environments, for example, how the sounds used by ETCS fit with the sounds from other systems in the train cab environment. And finally, we look at any coordination requirements between railway staff that exist or come about because of ETCS. So the human and organizational factors perspective on ETCS is very broad, and it's looking to optimize the system for the people who will ultimately use it. As I mentioned earlier, today's webinar is based on the outputs of the workshop that we held in UIC earlier this year. The participants in that workshop were asked to prepare their thoughts on issues they had already identified across 5 different topic areas. DMI issues on board around how information is presented to the driver, onboard behavior issues around how the system behaves and expectations that drivers might have of it, signaling and trackside issues relating to the design of the trackside system, issues related to how ETCS is trained, and finally, any issues relating to the migration phase. Of course, over 2 days, we didn't have time to cover all of those topics in huge detail. So we started with a brainstorm, and then we prioritized the issues that most people wanted to explore in most depth. At the end of the workshop, we'd worked on 13 different issues, which are fully documented in the report that we developed from the workshop. Today, we will present 6 of those topics and our mitigations for them. We have some caveats for the webinar. Firstly, we're not system design engineers. We've tackled this topic from our perspective and by applying our expertise in human and organizational factors. All the experts you will hear from today and the others who participated in the workshop have some knowledge of ETCS and the specifications, but our focus is on highlighting the human performance implications. We are going to present some suggested mitigations, but not all of these might turn out to be practical when they're examined in more detail. Instead of presenting a solution, our aim is to start a conversation today. So without further ado, I will hand over now to the first set of experts, Eric and Jean-Emmanuel, to present on the issues around the languages used on the DMI.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Eric Pebret, Safety Specialist at SNCF Voyageurs, and I'm in the company of my colleague, Jean-Emmanuel Leroy. We both started our careers driving trains, and now hold our positions at the Train Driving Safety Department. Hello, Jean-Emmanuel.
Hello, Eric.
Jean-Emmanuel, you are involved in the writing of ETCS procedures for our company's train drivers, and you still drive trains yourself.
Yes, that's right. I drive trains on a regular basis, conventional trains, but mostly high-speed trains in the national system TVM, that we have in France, as well as ETCS level 2, depending on the line's equipment. It gives me the ability to test procedures that I contributed to design.
Yeah, with some colleagues involved in the development and fine-tuning of ETCS, we have identified issues related to the wording of the text messages displayed on the DMI. The first slide is the one showing the French network. So I was talking to you about the wording of the text messages, which we happen to see on those few lines that you can see on the screen right now, which also show the future projects that we have in France. Next one, please. So what we are talking about is the small area just behind below the speed indicator, and some of those messages come from the European specification CCS TSI, which is originally in English, and translations of these messages are carried out by manufacturers at the time when they deploy their technical solutions. On top of that, on each project of ETCS, the client has the opportunity to formulate specific wording requirements, and this results in variations of the same message in DMIs and in the documentation.
Yes, what we see here is a lot of different text messages for the same event originally in the same language from one rolling stock to another. It's not only a matter of translating the Appendix E of the CCS TSI. Hundreds of messages come from manufacturers' internal specifications, not from the TSI. When discussed with end user representatives, infrastructure managers and railway utilities, one goal is to make their understanding easy and simple. But it requires trade-offs between precision and also simplification.
How do we manage these difficulties through written procedures for drivers?
We need to specifically consider every case that our drivers are potentially exposed to. As we can see in this example, all existing messages are included in our documents. There is no place for approximation. It is also because of the coexisting baselines and version on our rolling stock. This makes quite complicated documents indeed, as you can see.
So there are different text messages resulting from the same event. Can this have an impact on communications between signalers and drivers?
Yes, indeed. We have had a return of experience on the line linking France and Luxembourg. This is the first of our cross-border lines equipped with ETCS level 1 overlaid with ground signals on both sides, as you can see on the picture. There we have, among other trains, regional passenger traffic in cooperation with between CFL and SNCF. In the event of an incident, the driver must tell the displayed labels and messages that he has in its DMI to the signaler. Then the signaler must find the correct procedure in his operational document using this information. And you can see, the next slide, please. You can see here some extracts from the signaler's document. It was based on how SNCF's equipment behaves. It says it cannot reflect the diversity of trains on the line. So the signaler might not find the exact same message as the driver is telling him, and that's really a problem.
Okay, I see. But what about other consequences?
It can prove to be at least annoying and time-consuming, of course. Time to find the correct form from the European instructions, to fill it, and to transmit it to the driver. But there could also be cases where neither the driver nor the signaler realizes that they are not applying the procedure that covers the true risks of the situation. That's the plot.
Well, I guess that the driver and the signaler then engage in a conversation to try to eliminate their respective doubts. Non-technical skills and cognitive biases are involved here. Eventually, finding the meaning of what is happening is uncertain. One or the other, under time pressure and depending on his interests, experience, leadership, may try to impose his vision.
We're well aware of all this, of course. ETCS is already a complex system that is difficult for operators to deal with. Those differences in wording also increase communication problems.
What kind of consequence could be induced by choosing the wrong procedure?
Consequences would be very diverse. They could come from restarting the train in improper conditions or misusing the override EOA function.
Well, something really has to be done to mitigate those particular communication problems.
The ETCS work group at ERA is already working on standardized translations. It's being discussed, actually. There are lots of interest at stake. We could get standardized messages for all in a future version of CCS TSI. And it will bring a significant change for everyone, constructors, infrastructure managers, railway utilities, but we think it's worth it. It's a necessary step now. And in the meantime, infrastructure managers should try to address this on their own scale. They could prescribe common translations for their signalers and for railway utilities running on their network.
Okay, thank you. This topic of language in message wording led us to think about the transition between two infrastructures managers in ETCS at the border between countries that do not share the same operating language.
Yes, and the driver's attention is focused on the sequence of information and actions. If an incident occurs at that time, and he needs to contact the signaler, it is all the more difficult for him to provide the right information about the incident in the expected form. Quite simply, the driver may provide the text message in the language shown on his DMI, which may not be the infrastructure manager's language.
How can this be? Isn't the transition between the two languages imposed at a specified point on the line?
The thing is that no, it's not specified in the source rules at the moment. The driver can do it at the time he chooses. Actually, it's the thing. Bear in mind that switching languages on the DMI requires entering menus, then selecting, as you can see on the screen, validating, and so on. It's a task, as you can see, the task that requires most of his attention, for about 10 seconds. Therefore, it competes with other priorities, such as observing the track and also the signals. It's the same when setting up the GSMR system, for example.
Why would the driver not be allowed to set his DMI in the language of his choice, the one he prefers or the one he's used to?
There was a tolerance until recently because the source rules don't impose anything. But our return of experience showed us that we couldn't keep this situation any longer. For instance, in Luxembourg, the English language is mostly used on the DMI. Therefore, on the Luxembourg line, we now require that drivers to change the DMI language at the border point to ensure that French will be used on the French side.
Okay, but can we imagine a technical evolution of the system to take charge of the language switching automatically?
It's not considered possible to initiate an automatic language change on board. It's not specified, but we have other ideas. What could probably be achieved would be a balise or a message from the radio block center that would tell the driver to set the language to be used on the network the train is entering at the right moment.
Okay, thank you. These language issues are in any case good examples of areas where technical norms, operating procedures, and human capabilities are interlaced. Thank you for sharing all this with us, Jean-Emmanuel. Now is the time to hear about another onboard system behavior related issue. Next in line is John Gunnell, who is going to tell us about release speed management.
Thank you, guys. I will share mine. Hi there, my name is John Gunnell. I'm a Principal Human Factors Consultant at Atkins Realis. I've been working on the East Coast Digital Programme for the last couple of years, and we've recently been introducing ETCS Level 2 with signals away onto the London's Northern City line. I'm going to be talking to you about release speeds, which was another key human factors topic discussed during our recent HOF working group. Sorry, it's just not moving slightly. Oh, there we go. So release speeds management is used in ETCS systems to enable the driver to pull forward to the end of authority, and maximising the system's benefit of controlled speed. So we can see here in the two visuals how it's demonstrated on the driver's DMI on board inside their cab on their speed hook. You can see the light grey bar that's introduced, and how it works is demonstrated in this graph. I won't go into too much detail, don't worry, but I'm trying to just demonstrate here that at the very end of this speed control management, after it's gone through, when you're in ETCS, you have target speed monitoring in this front side, and then it goes into ceiling speed monitoring as well. But then we have release speed is the final point as you approach, and at much lower speeds. And we can see here that there is when it differs to other speed management where we have indication speed status and overspeed warnings presented. For release speeds, there's not the presence of this, and so we identified during our discussions at the working group that we have a risk of sudden emergency brake activation, which is called EBIs, emergency brake intervention, on an ETCS system, which can be intervening to the driver's movements, or we also could be experiencing the drivers having more of a conservative driving profile due to the caution of not wanting to have this emergency brake intervention introduced. The impact this has on human factors and the system performance is that we see that there's a risk of divided attention, which is a common factor to introducing ETCS and digital signaling, where we have a divided attention between the DMI, so the in-cab onboard system, and some much more heads down focused monitoring of that compared to the heads up monitoring. And obviously with release speed there is much more presence around stopping around platforms as such, and the duties of the driver to ensure safety of passengers and observing of any potential risks associated to that. But in the absence of that, then there is focus on the onboard system and the changing speed profiles at quite low speeds. What we also find is that there is a lack of awareness with release speed monitoring. That being that there is a generic tone which is provided to the drivers with ETCS, which is called a SINFO, audible alert. Now this is commonly used for multiple functions with ETCS, so there's not a clear distinction to when ETCS, when release speed, when a driver is entering into release speed. We also find the awareness is impacted by the lack of warning that is provided, which is obviously different to what we see with target speed monitoring and ceiling speed monitoring with onboards with ETCS, and then also the confusion between how it's presented. As you can see at the bottom, a comparison between how release speed is presented with a grey bar and how ceiling speed is presented with also a very slight difference in the grey shade. So a driver's confusion between which application is in use at that point of operation. What we found on East Coast digital program recently, and this is a graph that demonstrates two instances where release speed, a driver has exceeded the release speed and therefore had the emergency brake intervention intervening. So this is demonstrating that this is a real issue, and we've had experiences of this associated to this awareness of a driver entering into a release speed monitoring section, and those factors just discussed will be the common causal factors to that. What we do identify also, and must be made clear, is that these are common as we transition to a section where we no longer have signals, so the driver was previously had the reliance and the availability of additional information from a line side signal prompt. So with that removed, there was a lack of awareness from the driver, and that was seen the introduction of a couple more issues associated to passing release speeds, monitoring speed limits. So as a proposal from the group discussed at the workshop was how can human factors influence this, and how can we support the drivers when operating in release speed monitoring conditions. And as we are trying to see is what can be done in terms of supporting the driver through change. So the discussions around how the ERA spec could potentially be developed for operability in the future, and through change request potential, there is a need to provide more distinction with the visual presentation to this in comparison to the ceiling speed, and that's something to consider and to challenge for the future. And we also have obviously noted that tone, that SINFO tone, which is generically used, how could we consider alarms management and have a clearer strategy on how tones are used appropriately to support the driver, and distinction between those designs. From an actual application perspective, I think it's quite clear that we're aware that as we work on projects of introducing change, there's a key emphasis required on what are the operational needs and the range of different release speeds that could be applied, different speeds, understanding in the context of their particular scheme. So the use of drivability analysis and understanding the release speeds and what is appropriate for the driver to meet those constraints is a key focal point, and needs to be designed in at design stage of a program. And then also focusing on how do we appropriately test and refine the design of a speed restriction around release speeds to ensure that they're operationally appropriate for that particular case, using of course the use of the relevant driver representatives. So I will now be passing on to Nora, who's going to be talking about system diversity and the bugs associated to ETCS.
Thank you, John. So, as John said, the next issue that we've chosen to highlight is about system diversity and bugs in ETCS software. So, as ETCS is rolled out over time, there might be multiple different systems over national infrastructure or across the fleet within a railway organisation. These can vary in terms of the ETCS level used, the baseline specification applied, or even the supplier used who bring their own non-standardised elements. All of these differences affect how ETCS will behave in practice. So, for example, the calculation and display of braking curves varies quite significantly between baseline 3.4 and 3.6, and I'll show that in more detail on my next slide. And another example would be the presentation of supplier-specific alarms and messages. These can even vary within one single fleet, so a driver could drive a train in one direction with one set of ETCS behaviours and then have a totally different set of behaviours, or not totally different, but a different set of behaviours when travelling in the other direction. On top of this, suppliers will sometimes release software versions with bugs. The intention, of course, is to fix these during a later update, but the result for the end users is that the behaviour of the software also changes after that update. And we all know from our own mobile phone updates that this can be quite disconcerting, especially if you don't have advance notice of what's going to change exactly. Here you can see the braking curve diagrams from the specifications, which show how the speed monitoring behaviour has changed between baseline 3.4 and 3.6. We're not going to go into the details here of exactly what these differences are or the human factors issues associated with that change in behaviour, although there are some. The point we want to make today is that there is a big difference here in how ETCS will appear to the driver between these two specifications. So the limit, the target speed, will come up at a different time in baseline 3.6, much later, depending on the speed that the train is travelling at. So drivers get this different behavior of the system on board that they have to interpret. Why does this matter? Well, put very simplistically, to work with ETCS, drivers have to develop a mental model of the system. Initially, of course, that's provided through training, but as drivers gain experience, they'll expand that mental model based on their own experiences with the system. Their mental model describes how a driver can expect ETCS to behave, so it sets their expectation of the behavior, and that expectation influences how they choose to act. Those driver actions then, of course, in turn influence the system behavior as well as the system responds to the driver actions, and it creates this cycle. So to work well with ETCS, the driver needs a really good, solid mental model of the system. The problem with having multiple different versions is that drivers start to need multiple mental models, one for each version that they drive with. And the more mental models a driver has to have, the more difficult it becomes to keep them all up to date and accurate, and to select the right one at the right time. So we might find drivers starting to be surprised at how ETCS is behaving because they're applying the wrong mental model in that situation. In high pressure situations, this can be an additional stressor which could lead to a more serious error. Here's an example of how drivers in Switzerland are trying to support themselves in applying the correct mental model. Stickers have been applied beside the DMI to give them visual information on which system version is in use on that train. When we start to see these kind of workarounds, they're usually a very clear indication that there's a human factors issue with the system design. Stickers on equipment is a human factors red flag that we look for. It indicates that there's some missing information, that a gap is trying to be filled. There's clear implications of having multiple ETCS systems with different types of behavior. Obviously, more systems means more training, as drivers have to be familiar with how each one works and how they should use it. As I said earlier, more system versions also means more mental models and increases the chance that drivers could misunderstand what ETCS is doing and take the wrong action themselves. Put simply, it increases driver stress and opportunities for error. To manage this, drivers might have to slow down their processing and double check to take the right action. And this mightn't be a big factor in normal operations, but it could really slow them down in more complicated situations like fault recovery, or lead to an error in situations where they're under time pressure. And finally, there's also operational complexity introduced in the form of additional procedures and documentation that has to be managed by the railway organisation. So what do we think can be done about this? In the workshops, we thought about what the potential solutions and suggested mitigations might be. The specifications are likely to continue to evolve, so even more differences are likely in future, and it would be naive to suggest that ETCS can't be changed anymore. So we suggest two main mitigations. First, we believe that there should be a structured human error analysis as part of the risk assessment for any future system versions. This should consider what the differences are to the end users and how they can be made visible on the interface, whether that interface is for drivers or signallers or even maintainers. The aim is to make sure that their mental models are well supported, and it should also explicitly consider whether the potential for confusion between two systems is so great that the same end user should not be able to use any particular combination. Hopefully that won't ever be the case, but if it introduces a sufficiently high risk, we should consider it. The second mitigation is very straightforward, and it's based on those stickers that we saw from Switzerland. We suggest that the system version should be shown very clearly on the DMI home screen. The information is there in the system menu currently, but that's not very visible to drivers. They have to navigate through the system to find it. It would also be worth considering moving away from the numerical naming system, which is easily confused, towards something with more implicit meaning, or a kind of naming system using words maybe similar to how the Android mobile platform names their major updates. So thank you for your attention. It's now time for the first Q&A session on these three issues, which Virginie is going to coordinate for us.
We have 10 minutes for a question and maybe answer, yes, from the speaker. Bernard, do you see any question in the chat? I will start by Eric and Jean-Emmanuel, sorry, because they were the first speaker. So what do you think is a cognitive bias? Yes, bias. Now,
Okay, this is notion that may not be clear for everybody here in this meeting. So let's talk a bit about what a cognitive bias is. The dictionary says it corresponds to systematic errors in the way individuals reason about the world due to subjective perception of reality. So there are dozens of examples of things that our brain is doing in spite of our own objectives. We're not machines. And one of the most common ones is the confirmation bias. So like in some cases, you can say what I'm experiencing here is exactly the same case as the one I had a few hours ago or a few days ago. That's the confirmation bias. We can also experience the belief bias, such as when you recognize a situation from being exactly the same as another one, because you are so used to see something like a common fault. We could say that this particular fault or failure always come from this system. So once again, it's always this system and not another one. And there is also the anchoring bias. So it's the one when you see something in the first place and keep with this idea all along, such as when you have a train trip on the train, you stick with this event and never consider anything else in the following events.
so we have another question. I don't know for whom is it, but you will maybe find the speaker will understand. Is there any standard procedure to implement the new versions?
I think that's probably a question for me. I'm not sure if that means at European level. I imagine that ERA has a procedure that they go through to develop new versions. Question for them. And then I would expect each railway organization has their own procedure for managing change and introducing new versions, but it's not something that we examined specifically as part of the workshop on the day.
Okay.
John, you had also a question in
John,
the chat.
sorry, that's your turn. Can you maybe read that? Because the question is really, really long. And it's easier if you read it directly.
Absolutely. Yes, there's a question for John Gunnell. Have you considered redesigning to implement oral alerts spoken instead of tone? I'm thinking along the lines of aviation, where important messages are presented to the pilot in spoken words, i.e. monitor speed, as first level, and maybe more levels depending on how near we are to the danger. There have been several accidents in older aircraft where the same tone has been used to warnings, for example, takeoff land warnings and cabin altitude. I'm saying this only to highlight the importance of relaying the best possible info to the drivers to avoid confusion and to enable a swift understanding of the problem instead of what it's doing now. Best regards. Okay, so I think this is a really good point, and I'd love to hear more on exactly how these oral alerts have been applied in aviation industry, because I think there is some learnings from cross sectors that would be really beneficial for rail to understand. As you'll be aware, there is a ERA specification which defines interoperability, and there is specifics around how ETCS is applied across the industry, and how the tones are designed. So the challenge will be to introduce any sort of change would need acceptance from that, and it obviously can't be done on a case-by-case deployment perspective, but I think there is definitely worth the consideration of how different sensory tones and opportunities could be applied. So it's a great question, and I don't know if there have been considerations by ERA to do such type of change, but it's worth considering.
Oh yeah, thank you, John, for your answer. Thank you for this excellent question. So another question for SNCF. The first question is, there is no RSM alert S-Info implemented in Z24500
It's one of our
ETCS. Why? So
No, we don't have the answer yet, but we'll look for it and we'll give you an answer later on.
general question, no specific speaker. I like that. Until complete harmonization of operational rules, national handling and the different rules will be a barrier to cross-border traffic. And so is verbal communication that come with it. It would be interesting to know if instant translation tools are considered from HOF perspective in the driving signaler communication on the European level. Thanks. Thank you for this excellent question, Jens. Any question from unknown speaker, but maybe it's general.
And only know we can confirm this question, and this future tool has been considered by the ERA meetings and work groups. I don't know if any experimentation on it.
Yes, there is an experimentation between German-speaking railway companies and French ones, but it's not achieved already. But the work is going on. We'll check to give you a more complete answer.
Okay.
But that's very interesting. Yes, people have been thinking about it and are working on this topic.
So another question I think to John. Why is the spin monitoring release without definitively stop the train? Isn't there another updating bodies to release after signal change? John?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how to interpret that question. I think, I don't know if it's possible for whoever's asking the question to ask it.
Okay. Anyway, we will take all the question at the end and give you a detailed answer. A last question to Nora. Alors, are you going to present a topic regarding training issue in the coming topics? I think you mean in the coming workshop or something, yeah?
Yes, in the second half of this webinar. So coming up next, we have one of the 3 topics being presented is about training and training needs that we discussed in the workshop.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we covered more or less the question. Maybe we have some more that I cannot see here, like this one from Jonathan. We have multiple issues that already happened in Luxembourg with the scenario, even in the EOA, the EOA is indicated in the planning area since long. It's not really a question, but
we are aware of this, yes.
So maybe further discussion in between SNCF and Luxembourg on that. We will do more detailed question after the webinar. But I would like to thank everybody to play the game and to ask questions. And so we move now to Bernard is not Bernard. Okay, I like it. We will move now to Frédéric Calleux. He will present the signaler driver communication. And so, Frédéric, the floor is yours. You want my
No, thank you.
computer?
Thank you, Virginie. I will talk about signaler driver communication difficulties due to differences in formats, terminology, and symbology in the interfaces. I would like to do this by giving examples of wrong communication. I've been through safety events of the last 6 months within Infrabel, and I remembered a few earlier incidents. So the first one is incorrect localization of the train. We had an incident, a train had passed the signal at danger, and the train driver told the signaler he was at the signal. So the signaler thought, okay, I will reopen the sign, the signal, and give permission to drive. But the train driver said the next signal is closed. Of course, because he passed the signal, so the next one wasn't already open. But this could have been a bad accident because the train driver could get to the next signal and maybe caused an accident. So the localization of the train is very important. And at this point, the signaler had the wrong info on his DMI, I would say. Because the train was in the gray zone between two track circuits. So it was bad communication. The next event I found was the train departs without authorization. The train driver, he had a trip in the middle of nowhere, stopped, and he also received a message on its DMI, RBC error. So the train driver did a reset, and he started continuing his travel to receive the new movement authorities. This was a fault of the train driver. He should have asked permission to drive at the signaler, but he relied on his DMI at this point. A next issue we had, passing the wrong traction code and safety communication. The next three issues are a bad communication in the instructions. So our instructions are very clear. Just you need to give a signal, and the conductor he gives the wrong signal, the wrong traction code, the wrong location points. How comes drivers and signalers also, they repeat data due to our rules? We have to repeat every message and use the NATO alphabet, and we still make mistakes. And that's what Eric told about the cognitive biases. So that is a problem. Maybe we can do something about that. Another incident we had was a spot during bad communication by the train driver and the shunter. Another huge issue is taking the wrong instructions. We have national instructions, we have European instructions. In Britain, they call them written orders. But frequently, the signalers take the wrong form. That's a very strange thing. There is a procedure for each error. There is procedure, but they need to take the right procedure. But we have a lot of incidents when people take the wrong procedures. Then another incident we had was a misinterpretation of ETCS 1 and 2. So the train was driving on an ETCS 2 line, but there was a problem with the ETCS 2, and they need to drive on ETCS 1. ETCS 1 was the fallback for ETCS 2. The signaler calls the train driver and said, watch out, the next signal will be closed. At this moment, the signal is open, but I will close the signal for you. It was a stop marker sign. I will make an end of authority at the stop marker sign. No, the driver said, yes, okay for me. But he was on ETCS 1, and the driver was already past the last beacon who sent the information to the train. So the driver never received the end of authority of the signal. So at that point, the driver had a trip at the end of authority because he didn't receive the correct information. That's a problem here because ETCS level 1 and ETCS level 2 is maybe to interpret it differently. Why it is difficult to make the right assumptions. There's a lot of new vocabulary in the ETCS. We have trip, driving modes, SR, full supervision, on-site. We have European instructions and so on. The DMI on the train driver, that's the new symbolic. In the old days, the train driver has to look at the signals, the line side signaling, but now he has in-cab signaling. There are differences in DMIs depending on the manufacturers. There are different bay lines, different ETCS level. The old vocabulary remains. The old signaling remains. The Class B system remains. There are differences in national instruction forms from country to country. We all have our national instructions. Driver and signaler rely on each other for information sharing. And of course, we have European instructions, written orders. That's new. So you see, it's getting all very complicated for a human being. So we have difficulties in communication by the human factors. Cognitive load, stress, fatigue leads to errors in passing safety information. Poor information exchange can lead to lack of situational awareness, can lead in mistakes. Humans misinterpret messages. They forget protocols. They are the social relationships. That's more an organizational factor to me. Complex technology can be very confusing. You have cultural differences, language differences. Then the organizational influences, different culture, lack of training, complex infrastructures. The working environment, working instructions and rules come from several sources. So when something is happening, the signaler have to prioritize the potentially instruction to be used. The same for the driver. Then we have technical and systemal factor. We have a lot of paper-based processes. They don't have really a backup for the paper-based systems, so they are increasing the risks of the safety. So in our workshops, we noticed it. We all have the same problem. every infrastructure manager and railway undertaker, we have the same problems. And we think there is need for a shared mental model for the train driver and the signaler. We need to know tasks and roles of each other. We need to know the procedures and the expectations. We need to have the same situational awareness. So, as a possible mitigation, we suggest a specification update. So we would like to have that infrastructure managers give a list that they specify what are the needs of a signaler. What this signaler is missing from the field. And of course, vice versa, what is the train driver missing? We would like to have that as first action. We need to have a clear information about the information that's missing. And then, of course, when we have the information, we can give visual and auditory support. We can handle expectations and disruptions. We can train the human in the errors. So this was my last slide. The next speaker is John Bai. He's the head.
Richard.
Richard Bai is the head of the Ergonomics and Human Factors Department of Network Rail.
Thank you very much, Frederick.
Enjoy Richard's.
So, Richard.
Thanks, Fred. Can you see my screen?
Perfect, Richard. We can see your presentation.
Good afternoon. So thank you very much. I'm going to be speaking about fault management. So to set the scene, let's clarify what we mean by fault and management. So a fault is a broken part or a weakness in a machine or system, something that disrupts normal operation. And management is the activity of controlling or dealing with something effectively. So in ETCS, fault management isn't just about fixing technical issues. It's about how people interact with the systems, how information flows, and how decisions are made under pressure. This is important because faults and failures require frontline operational staff to respond with specialist procedures, often without all the information they need and under time pressure. So what's different about ETCS? So in conventional signalling, using colour lights, it's already very complicated, but we need to move to in-cab signalling to release additional safety cost and performance benefits. So with ETCS, this means that we're moving the signalling equipment from the track side to the cab. And that's quite a lot of equipment. So there's a DMI that provides the driver with all the real-time safety information they need to drive the train. The EVC, the European Vital Computer, manages the systems on board the train. There are data and voice radios that communicate between the train and the rest of the network. There's a JRU, which is the train's black box recorder to support incident analysis. There's a power supply to keep everything working. There's a Belize reader to receive messages from the track side, an odometry system that provides accurate train speed and positioning data, and an emergency brake interface to stop or slow the train if it's going too fast. And then on the track side, there's a Belize that passes messages to the train. There's an RBC, the radio block center, that controls the interlocking and is the core of the trackside equipment, and that connects to the signalling control system, which sends controls to the interlocking and receives feedback. There's a GSMR that sends controls, sends messages and provides connectivity between all of the systems and all the components. And then there's some humans involved as well. So we obviously have a signaller who's responsible for train routing and regulating the system, the service, the driver who obeys movement authority and delivers safe journeys, and a maintainer look after the system, provide proactive maintenance and help when things are broken. So if you notice the interplay between the humans and machines, there's a lot going on. ETCS is what we call a joint cognitive system, and that means that the cognitive bits, the cognition or the computation or the thinking, is shared across the system between all the different components. So the system's got a lot of brains. The driver's obviously got a brain. There's a brain in the EVC. There's a brain in all the communication systems. There's a brain and computation in the RBC. And the maintainer and the signaler obviously have got to do a lot of coordination, thinking and decision making. So this is complicated enough when things are working fine, but each role, the driver, the signaler, the maintainer, face unique challenges when faults arrive. So one example might be a train might be expecting to receive a message from a balise, but what if that doesn't arrive, or if it's corrupted? It could be a fault with the balise itself. The balise might not actually be there. It might have been damaged, or it might be missing. The balise reader might have lost power, so the balise might not receive, might not be able to pass the information to the train. The EVC then might not get a message, or if they have got the wrong message, or if there's a corruption, the EVC will then be generating faults themselves, or the EVC might initiate a break application. And the RBC will be receiving information about the faults, or the whole problem could have originated from the RBC in the first place with the corrupt messages or a fault from the track side. So this is just one example, and we could put these little there could be a problem across the whole system, that the problems could cascade anywhere through the system, and that's the responsibility of the driver, the signaler, the controllers and the maintainers to figure out what's going wrong and how to fix it. And this requires a fault management control structure. So what we need in place, the driver and the signaler would need to coordinate, and there's a relationship between the driver and the signaler and the humans in the system, which follows an ETCS fault management cycle to detect, to understand, to decide and respond to the faults. The humans and the machines play a role, and the drivers and the signalers must interpret the alarms, communicate effectively and take timely action. But obviously there's a lot more going on. There's a driver machine interface, the EVC, the radio block center, the signaling control center system, and the GSMR providing the voice and data. And all of these systems are joined up with control action. So the driver has some control actions in terms of the power and the brake and making recovery actions. The DMI talks and provides interactions to the EVC. And then there's a feedback loop, which is really important. The EVC will provide action histories back through to the DMI, to the driver. And the DMI is providing an overview of the system states, and hopefully that information is timely and it's with enough detail. And that's enables the driver to detect the fault and to monitor the system. And then in parallel, there's information being passed between the systems and back up from the RBC to the control system with information about the system state or any software errors or data that's links that are down. And these will then be provided to the signaler by way of alarm histories or failure modes. And again, the signaler, like the driver, has got to detect the fault and monitor the system, and then use that to provide movement authority or recovery actions to make sure that the overall coordination between the driver and the signaler, where they can communicate to each other, develop a shared understanding, make and receive calls. But then there are wider interfaces. So both the driver and the signaler have to do communication and reporting to make sure that everybody else knows what's going on. So I'm trying to convey here that the system is complicated. There's a lot going on. and when systems degrade or systems fail, it gets even worse. And I haven't even shown the maintainer on here because the maintainer is often out of the loop. So there could be various challenges when we're in a degraded mode or there's a fault. The alert could come through, but the driver might miss the alerts. The signaler could also miss the alert because of a divided attention issue. There's a lot going on, so everybody, the driver and the signaler and the controllers, would need to pay attention to the right things at the right time. That might be split across lots of different things. Fault management obviously requires a lot of manual intervention, paperwork and forms. So that introduces things like transcription risks. So we could have a signaler having to fill in lots of paperwork for the European instructions of the written orders. This also increases coordination costs between the driver and the signaler, and increased workload. So the humans in the system during the fault situations are under a lot of pressure. There could be also a lot of communication and communication burdens between the systems in the technology. And in general, one example of a problem is that we get latency, incomplete information, and delays. And these delays could introduce service delays for passengers, but also if you've got lots of trains that are delayed, these have knock-on risks to safety and performance with overcrowding at stations, the risk of trains being stranded and passengers getting off the trains when it's not safe for them to do so. So there's challenges are not just technical. It's about how the people interact with the systems and each other. So reporting faults, for example, where it's not necessary to keep the trains moving, creates unnecessary workload and risk, and creates distraction. So there's a couple of suggestions for improved fault management. So the first of the two suggestions we'll just talk through quickly is that we should update the specifications for message protocols so that the information flowing back up through the systems to the drivers and the signalers are improved. This means that the drivers and the signalers get real-time diagnostic data, and then we also get that information to the maintainer, so the maintainer's got a real-time view of what's going on. And we need to bypass the need for multiple systems and proprietary data, and create an overall joined-up system that enables the fault detection and diagnosis to be semi-automated, and reduce the manual interventions that are required. And this could then, in the fullness of time, enable things like European instructions to be auto-populated, meaning that the driver, the signaler, the maintainer, and other people would have immediate visibility of what's gone wrong, when it happened, why it happened, and what to do about it. Because a lot of the information is within the system, it's just shared between the different parts of that joint cognitive system. So not everybody is coordinated in what they need to do and what's happened and what needs to happen next. And one way to help create that system is to develop a system-wide alarm management strategy. So it's joining the dots really between all the different components to describe the system information with end-to-end data flows, and making sure that it's clear when an alarm is raised, that the action and the decision making is clear for all the staff that are involved. So we're connecting the drivers, the signalers, and the controllers through the technology. But this means that we would need to remove things like contractual requirements between railway undertakings and infrastructure managers. So we're happy to share and coordinate and share information between the systems. So that's a quick run through fault management. The next talk is Bernard. Bernard Penez is the safety culture specialist from Infrabel. I think Bernard's talking about training.
Thank you, Richard. That's the last topic, but the For me, the most interesting one, because we are speaking about people, how the people are trained, how the people are ready to work with ETCS, and how they are working with ETCS. First, we have a very big already handbook of ETCS drivers handbook made by the ERA. Very big, with a lot of process inside.
It's very thorough, but Bernard, do you think it's enough for drivers to just learn by heart this rule book?
For sure not, because, for me, training course is a content. And we have here the content with the ETCS driver's handbook. But it's also a question of pedagogical method. It's difficult for a French guy, a Belgian guy, sorry. Yeah. It's training you made in the classroom, training you made on the field, in a cab train, is it in the signal house, is it with a peer? You have so much pedagogical methods, but it's not identified there. It's also a question of assessment, because you receive and you develop certain competences, but we need as enterprise, as organization, to assess the competences of the person. But you assess on one moment, but you need also to regularly assess the competency, to review the competencies, and to update the competencies. Then, the whole, we have already the whole here in this handbook is really precious, but also we need, I think, to work on the why can be improved.
So you are implying that the knowledge of operators is not enough, and that they have to understand the system.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, absolutely. Understanding a system is really important, because there is different advantages over the understanding of a system. First, I can maybe it's a boost motivation. It's where you are in the system, in the process, who's coming just before you, just after you, and you know what you are doing and why you are doing. And it's really important we include in the system to have also an understanding about the full image of the aspect. It's also why help for when you learn something to enhance the retention. It's more easy, like you were at schools, you had poems to learn. It's difficult, but we can't have that. It's more easy to learn by heart, also when you understand the different aspects. You may also encourage prioritization, for example, because you understand the system. You understand also what kind of action you need to put first in your prioritization of the system. And you can connect that to the experiences. It's not just only theory. It's just also something connected with what you are living in your real life. And we saw in this group that knowledge is important. Know the process, knowing how you need to do stuff. It's really important, for sure. But understanding is also important, and both we need to have.
Okay, so put it like this, I think it's quite straightforward. And so what does the reality of training tell us?
you know, the reality, it's something more difficult. There is different issues. It's for some companies really difficult to know who should be trained on ETCS and on which level. Should a train driver know ETCS on the same level as a person doing the maintenance, for example, or an engineer or a signaler? That sometimes is really difficult to know. It's also another issue. It's there is variation between different countries, different enterprise, different organization on the content and on the duration. And this variation, it's also a question about availabilities of the competences in your companies, and also the identification of your needs. Which kind of level of ETCS are you working on? What kind of technology you have? What kind of train you have, and so on. Then that's really different issues, but also we need to, a big issue I need to raise. We speak a lot about that. It's sometimes the time between the colleague is learning the ETCS, is having the competencies of the ETCS, of working with ETCS, and the moment when it going really on the fields. And sometimes it may be months, and that is maybe difficult for him. And also a source of maybe of risks also.
Yeah. So it's really a matter of designing the right training courses with the right content and at the right moment for the right persons. So if we failed in doing this, what kind of consequences do you think of?
For me, what we need absolutely to avoid, and we speak about that, and some colleagues use the term of complicated system, and others spoke about complex system. We absolutely need to avoid this idea of the black box. Because the black box, you enter information on one side with the black box, and there is no information going out on the other face of the box. But we need to manage that, and can have frustration, mistrust in the ETCS. For example, signaler have training and understanding of ETCS on one way of, and one way to understand, have one way of understand the ETCS. The train driver also his own way to understand the ETCS. And when something happens, they need to complement each other, to manage this different point of view altogether. And that's the problem of the black box. And also it gives a lack of understanding. It can affect the efficiency of the implementation. And finally, and second aspect of the risks and of the risk is that it's the skill you have when you learn something. The skill you have necessitates to have practice, repetition. And if you don't have this opportunity to work with that, you will lose it. You will, or not really lose it, but you not have so much ability to use it. And sometimes it can be difficult for the persons and also for the system.
So you're linking knowledge, skills, and the efficiency, the overall efficiency.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of those efficiency problems?
For example, yes, a very good example is coming from SNCF. Yes, thank you to you. It's a topic when they make the comparison between problem solve with ETCS and problem solve on TVM, the train voie machine, the automatic system for France, and the time used for manage the issue. The time is 2 times more important with the ETCS system. Then these black box we need to use it. We need to understand it for trying to be more efficient in this topic.
Thank you. So to avoid these efficiency problems, these issues, what can we think of as mitigation measures?
There is different mitigation measures. It's not this one, it's the present one. Yeah. It is the first about the documentation implementation. What should be interesting is to know how the different other enterprise implements the generic documentation. Should be nice to have best practices over that. To know also, that's a second point, how many time they are using and try to have a common point of view of the time for training, the time between 2 trainings, for example. And also for having a common understanding also over the competence management on ETCS. Another aspect is, like we said, I think it's really important. It's the first, I think, message I will give it to you, is to understand the why. Try to avoid the black box. And there is also training tools. It's really going with the peer, seeing the peer, try to exchange. Is it a sort of live my life? It's a job shadowing, for example. And how try to fix it also. Who is the training for? That's really important. Do we speak about trainer, signaler, trackside maintenance, and so on? It's really important to see that and to fix that and to make the identification of that. But training also speak about trainers, and we need to define who is the trainer, what is the competences of a trainer, how we need to manage this aspect of the competency management of a trainer. What are the requirements of him? And last but not least, because that is really important, ETCS, theoretically is very nice, perfect, but when something happens, when there is a degraded operation, unexpected situation, we need absolutely for that training about that. Is it simulators? Is it something else? But we need absolutely to train about this sort of degraded operation and unexpected scenario. Voilà, that was a topic we managed in this last presentation, and now I will give the floor to Virginie for the last questions.
Yeah. So thank you to the 3 last speakers, Frederick, Richard, Bernard, and if Nora is okay, we will move to the Q&A session and see if ever we have a question raised from participants.
Yep, no problem. So actually there was a question raised in the middle for me, so I'll address that first and give the speakers a chance to catch their breath. So the question was whether the workshop included talks about the visibility of the system boundary sign between ETCS level 2 and other signaling systems. The sign is not as visible as an ETCS stop sign. So Morton, no, this from memory, this isn't one of the issues that was raised at the first workshop, but maybe hold that thought when we talk in a minute about the next steps. Maybe there'll be an opportunity to discuss it in the future, because for sure we didn't cover every human and organizational factors issue that's out there with ETCS, but maybe in future we'll have the opportunity to do a bit more. Okay, I think we have a question here on the training. It's to SNCF, but maybe I'll ask it more generally, and maybe Bernard and Eric, you might answer together. It's about the importance of training and understanding the system, and why in SNCF, but I think in many railways, there's not a continuous training support on ETCS, and no collective training, and maybe even simulators aren't equipped with the correct baseline version. So maybe you can comment on why you think that is, or how important it is from a human and organizational factors perspective.
I think, Nora, that is really the topic in the essence of this webinar. We are around here speaking about training, and we show that, and we feel, and we share this topic about we need to manage on another way the ETCS training, and that is really one of the conclusion, I think, of my presentation. The third conclusion of my presentation: we need to build and to share a sort of ETCS competence management, in continuous improvement for sure, and that's why it is happened. It's an analysis we need to do in the different companies, but I think we need now we have the constatation, the evidence that there is something missing. There is something we need to have something more. We need to share together and to work together, and voila. That's my point of view in my response, I think.
Maybe I can add something for SNCF. We have simulators, and we use them almost once a year for ETCS training. And for instance, in level 2, what we used to consider was to train drivers with incidents, with return of experience, with complicated issues, but it was not responding to their needs, because we are using level 2 mainly on high-speed lines with no stations, no stop, or only two or three stops in the east line, but in the west or in the southwest we have no stations in the line. So what was difficult for drivers was to deal with on-site mode, which is really basic. They never encountered an EOA, and sometimes they had handover problems with an EOA at the front of the train, and so there's no need to look for very complicated situations. More often, it's more efficient to train people with really common issues in ETCS, but it's because of how we use ETCS in France in high-speed lines. In the future, we will have a line in the Riviera, and it will be totally different because it's an old line converted to ETCS level 2, and the issues will be very different. The driver will be will have to run in OS mode more often, in SR mode too, and the training will be different. So the training, what I mean is the training must be related to the exploitation, and not only to the return of experience.
Yeah, I will also say that there is always place for improvement on the material supporting the training. And there is also a question about stress. I think it's related because all this training is there to prevent stressful situations, to make them more familiar, and to limit hesitations on the part of drivers and signalers. So stress can be defined as a situation when you feel that your resources will not be enough to deal with the situation. And really training is one of the key aspects to improve the stress problems. But stress is always there, so it's really a personal thing. And there are also courses to deal with stress in a physiological manner. We already know things that can be done on this field also.
I think also we speak a lot about train driver. It's really important in ETCS, but also you have the person who plays the ETCS, who make the plan of the ETCS, who maintain the ETCS, and I think we really need to build a very large understanding, awareness about ETCS, and to try to train all these persons on the same base and to have a common base. It should be very nice in each company, in the infrastructure manager and in the different highway undertakers.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I think the suggestion that Bernard made in the mitigations is to address exactly this point, to reduce maybe some of the variability that happens across Europe and ensure that there is a minimum standard of training that's applied. I think you've all given a very comprehensive answer to that question, and also I think followed up on a couple more in the chat. So if there are any more questions from anybody watching the webinar, please put them in the chat, because we have a little bit of time, so I think we can address a few. I'm going to move on to a question here about underload and situation awareness. So I'm not really sure who wants to answer this. In a highly in a highly automated system like ETCS, level 2, being under-challenged in normal operations can be a surprisingly valid point, but takes a toll on situational awareness both to the signallers and the drivers. How do HOF experts see that topic?
Well, in normal situations, the interlocking system provides the safety of the operations. But of course, there's a need to have a situational awareness. What's the speed of the lines? Where are the stop marker signs? Where are the signals? Where are the stations? The stop places? But of course, in the perceptions, there are many outcomes. You have a speed on the line, but it's not it's not for sure. You can't drive on that speed. You have to know. That's the situational awareness. It's very large aspect of thinking. It's not just one fact. It's more than one thing.
Thank you, Frederick. And I have one more question myself for Richard. What training or support do you think is most needed to help staff adapt to fault management in ETCFs?
Quite a lot. I think Bernard covered a lot of it. I think just to the point that Fred was just talking about in terms of automation. I think ETCS is great when it works fine, but automation often leaves humans with the hardest tasks. So during fault management, the humans are left to handle the sort of the rare, the unpredictable, and the complex situations under pressure. And to the earlier conversations, we have things like skill fade, which is difficult, and monitoring as well is a cognitive demanding task. So it's quite difficult to understand and prepare for what's going wrong, because the automation as well can mask problems until they become critical. So a lot of the problems are hidden until they're not, and then all of a sudden all of the computer systems have given up, and it's up to the human then to step in and figure out what to do. And then that requires a diagnosis of the technical systems, but also then an understanding of the communication and the shared information between all the different operators, and then invoking procedures which deliver safe and efficient performance to keep the trains running again. So the training burden around that is quite complicated. And I think some of the work we did on the first workshop was tied into the what can we do to maybe look at the specifications, but obviously the implementation of the specifications is another set of problems, or an opportunity for infrastructure managers and for railway undertakings to figure out how best to manage the change and the transition between the current systems and the new ETCS railway, and that requires a lot of simulation-based training, practice, rehearsal, and a whole load of investment in the people and process side of the railway operations, and not just the technology. And it's that we found actually creates additional complexity.
Great, thank you, Richard. I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I think we can move on. Virginie, I think we were just going to finish with summarizing the next steps for this work. So, just the next slide, please. So just as a reminder, the objectives for this work were to create a community who can share knowledge of ETCS issues, or of HOF issues with ETCS and the potential solutions. And we also hope to influence the future specifications to bring a more user-centered approach to ETCS. So we hope you found the conversation interesting today. And we hope we succeeded in our aim of starting that conversation about HOF and ETCS. So the next steps, if we have the next slide, please. Following this webinar, we're going to publish the full report of the workshop that we held. You can get a copy of that by emailing Virginie, and her address is on the screen, and it will also be available for download soon from the Rail HOF website, and you can also see the address for that website on the screen. As we mentioned earlier, we also intend to suggest some change requests for consideration by ERA, and we will be progressing those in the next couple of months. And finally, we want to enlarge our network and plan another workshop for 2026. So some of you have already raised topics in the chat today that we haven't addressed yet. Other topics that we know are interesting from a HOF perspective are migration, presentation of text messages, and the use of simulation, which was mentioned today as well. If you are interested and you have knowledge of both ETCS and HOF, then please do reach out to Virginie to join us, and we will keep you informed of the plans for the next workshop. So I'm going to hand back now to Virginie to close the webinar.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everyone. Alors, I will be really brief. So, yeah, just to remind you that that's the beginning of something. Okay, we started in June 2025. We have also, we know that ERA is doing some working group on that. The goal is not to multiple many working group and to redo what ERA is doing really well. So the thing is, it's another space here where we are more discussing, exchanging with double experts, as you understood, ETCS, HOF. And so that's the beginning. We started in June. It was our first workshop. So here it was the results of this workshop today. So we are open to have new person coming with us in this network, ETCS HOF. So please do not hesitate to contact me for that. And at the moment, we can say we are 20% in this network. So we have space for you if you want. And so we will organize, as Nora said, another workshop in person in Paris. I insist on that because it's really valuable to see each other, to work together through workshop that like we did last time. And so that's it. I would like to really thank all the speakers, the excellent speaker that we had today, to share their experience, their expertise. And okay, so I think it was, useful for me, but also I hope it was useful for you, people on the participants. And so I will close this webinar now, and we will come back to you through LinkedIn and through mailing from UIC for the next workshop and maybe a next webinar after the workshop next year. Okay, thank you very much to everybody. And I wish you a pleasant end of afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.